What's up, folks? Justin Garcia here, aka Master Chim. And on the interwebs, I have guest, friend, longtime participant in the world of the Pressure Project, Jamey Martin. Jamey, say what's up to the listeners.
Hey, what's up, guys?
And for those of you that don't know, Jamey is, well, I'll let Jamey tell you more of his background, my interaction with Jamey, and how I came to know, him and his wife. You guys just participate in all the cool conversations online. You guys tend to be there. You guys have, and especially you've really over the last few years have provided a lot of insight and commentary that has motivated me to go down my own, research rabbit holes on more than one occasion. And the conversation that I wanted to have today, I thought you'd be perfect for. Before we get into that, just tell the listeners and viewers a little bit about who you are and how you came to be what we're going to talk about today, sort of familiar with and I guess a friend to the Norse, pagan, tradition.
Well, let's see. I've been an Anglo-Nordic heathen since I was like 12 or 13 years old. So that's about 26 years now. And I've been studying it for probably a good 25 of those years. And that's it right there. You gather a lot of information in that time. You get a lot of experience in that time. All the information has time to organize itself in your subconscious. And yeah, that's
right.
Me.
Right on. And so Anglo-Nordic heathen, break down the construction of that category for the listeners.
Well, I could just say Germanic heathen. It's a term that a lot of linguists use just to get the Scandinavian languages, the German languages, the English language, all the Gothic languages. They're all dead, the East Germanic. But it's just an umbrella term. In my case, I have ancestry that comes from England and France, and then of course you have your Norse influence and your Danish influence in there. So I just kind of default to calling it Anglo-Nordic, and it's the indigenous beliefs of the Anglo-Nordic peoples.
Right on. Yeah, I've had an interesting journey myself to this point, and one of the things that I'm always being exposed to are different people's process that you just described. Like what it is that people use to identify themselves and when they do consider themselves to be, and I use the generic term, heathen, because I want to just get to the point in most of the conversations where that context is relevant. But it's always interesting. And for a lot of the viewers, I'm sure they're not going to be familiar with the lion's share of specific information we'll be discussing today. So I want to sort of bring everybody along at a followable pace, if that makes sense. So why I reached out to you is I wanted to have a talk about morality for the most part. And I identify morality as, the virtues of a people, codified in their customs and traditions and habits and what is sort of the guiding force in people's behavior, and how do we treat each other ethically? How do we treat each other in a way that is functional? And a lot of the content that we will find, because I think in society right now, everybody notices the deficiency in that morality and the dysfunction in the habits and customs that we're becoming, more and more indoctrinated with and victims of, over time. I think that there's a need, a calling, a yearning, a hunger for a move back to the functional, a move back to the natural, the organic. And I wanted the conversation to not be monopolized by the Christian perspective. And, to all the Christians that are watching, this isn't going to be in any way an anti-Christian thing. But there are a lot of people here who don't connect with the Christian identity and connect with the heathen identity and all of its variations, more broadly pagan, I could probably say. And I wanted to provide some content and context for those individuals. And just all around, just have a powerful talk on what morality is and why it's so important.
Right. I think one of the big words that you got there was organic.
Right.
And that the elder morality, if you want to call it morality, we call it thew, but that's kind of a broad term that also encompasses customs, virtues, and habits of behavior. And the organic part of it is you go back all the way back in evolution. You got bloodlines running all the way back there, and the family unit and the tribe, they all evolved organically over time. They didn't sit down and intellectualize these things and try to print them out on paper and hand them out to the next neighbor over, which is probably one of the big fallacies of something like Christianity.
Right.
It's being imposed from without, rather than just welling up from within the group, or as a matter of what it takes to keep that group going and, as you would say, functional.
Right. Yeah, and to me, it's as I connect with more individuals online and in the spaces that I tend to dabble, I find that a lot of people tend to have, or I've found that a lot of people have their own take, their own terms, their own way of framing the understanding, the concept of what I say is functional. One of the video programs that I made, Function First, I talked about, I used the metaphor of the aquarium and how the aquarium is basically a constructed, engineered reality. And people who are inside that aquarium are bound by the incentives and the formulas that allow them to thrive in that environment. But the environment in and of itself is artificial. And they tend to disconnect their nature from what is successful over time, to the point where they cannot, they really don't realize where one ends and the other begins. So I know that, and I've told the story before of a buddy of mine's training partner who was, from the city, and they happened to be doing a training in the woods. And as it started getting late in the day and the sun started going down, this city guy basically started losing his shit. And he wasn't used to the darkness of the woods, AKA darkness, right? AKA nighttime. So when you start to say that there are individuals who start experiencing stress responses to nighttime, like I haven't found many simpler examples of dysfunctional evolution in who we are as a people,
Right. Yeah. It's spooky out there at night, I tell you. You hear some strange noises when you're out there camping in the middle of the night. So I can relate, but it's true. It's a very unnatural response.
Yeah.
One of the things that you'll read about when you get around to reading Odin the One-Eyed God is how they trained their youths back in the day. And that was basically, you're out in the bush, here's your knife, whatever you might need to survive, and now you got to figure out how to survive. I'd imagine that they'd have like a wolf pack leader, an alpha, some older, more experienced male who was actually a man of the tribe, maybe, being their scout leader, as we might call it today. Mm-hmm. And at the same time as they're learning what it takes to survive in nature, you would also be indoctrinating them with the customs and the morals of the tribe, so that when they got back, they could actually function in the tribal community.
Right.
And, and not be a drag on it too, because they could take care of themselves.
Right. Yeah. And it's, one of the challenges I've had with my 3 sons, my daughter, my kids, is how do I generate that experience while also, preparing them for the specific aquarium formulas that I know they will need to engage at certain points. And it's an interesting journey, over the last, my oldest is 12 now. Over the last, 12 years or so, I've found that the hardest thing to do is to have them prioritize the need to connect with the natural. it is such a distraction. It is such a sort of condemning, sabotaging energy to expose kids to TV, to expose them to the video games, to expose them to everything else that is just like a fucking drug waiting to, to grow the addiction inside of them. And how to, not just demand, tyrannically that they connect with the natural, but incentivize it and create an allure, an attraction, and draw to it. And, to me, the easiest thing that I found was I had to move to the fucking woods. It's like, it's a lot easier to sell them on how great the woods are when they're in your yard, and it's been a great success where that's concerned. But I look at these kids, right now I'm in my office in the Bronx, and I look at these kids and teens that are walking around these neighborhoods, like they don't have a fucking shot in hell, So what are some of the things, you mentioned, training of the youth, but I want to get into what are some of the customs that we see, in these different societies of the past and where those societies differed from today. And I know it's a very easy, broad question, but starting to niche down, like what is the heathen answer to morality, and why do we, not need the government to tell us what is right? Why do we not even need, the Bible to tell us what is right? Why did heathens know what was right, and how did they transfer that along, the generations?
I think it was most of it, well, monkey see, monkey do. For one thing, you're observing how the adults in your life conduct themselves. And if you don't have that, you can have all the words, all the fancy words written down on a piece of paper that you want, but if the words don't match the actions of the adults around you, kids are going to spot that out like a monkey can spot out a ripe banana at 100 yards.
Right.
They're going to spot the hypocrisy immediately.
Right. Now, what do you think? So it's I mean, the easy take, and it's one that I've been sharing for some time now. It's just like it's not about, and I think that the mistake that people make today, from everything from big government to fucking socialism, communism. You've heard my socialism communism analogy. Socialism is to communism what HIV is to AIDS. Right, for the people that try to connect the two, like that's as much of a separation as I'm willing to make. But they seem to think, the general thing seems to be, with these dysfunctional philosophies, I know better than nature. What has developed organically, is that's easy shit. I figured it out. I've got the way. And we see this repeated over and over again with these people that just put themselves ahead of the universe, ahead of the process that brought everything to where we are, right?
Yeah, they think they can impose their intellectual ideas and make reality conform to that, when it should be their ideas that are being shaped by the experience of reality.
Right. Go
ahead.
Right. So let me ask you, speaking about the gods, right? And the gods of, the Germanic pantheon, Odin and the crew, we see a spectrum of behaviors. How is it that a moral people would have these deities, these gods, who have behaviors that you see so seemingly inconsistent at times? How does a moral people reconcile that? What is the relationship to the gods? Like, one of the things that, when people ask me, you worship Odin? And I, personally, I don't worship anybody. I honor Odin. I honor gods. I honor the traditions that these deities represent and the customs that they've inspired. But there are also some pretty wacky stories, and if I'm thinking of a moral people, I'm not thinking of gods in drag. I'm not thinking of gods, in disguise, banging people's wives and stuff like. So how do you reconcile that, and what's your take on that?
I think it isn't really spelled out in the myths, but you got your home team, you got your tribe, your in-group, the in yard, as opposed to the Uten yard, the inside versus the outside. Maybe versus isn't the best word to define it, but that's out there, right? You got to take care of your group first. And the type of morality that, type of behavior that is acceptable in the in-group is not the same as what's accepted out there. For instance, the wolf in Germanic belief, that's something that you want to emulate if you're out on the battlefield.
Right.
You know that. But if you're in your home community emulating the wolf, that's despicable behavior.
Right.
It'll get you hung in the
Right.
older heathen society, and they'll hang a wolf or a dog up there alongside you as well, just to say, hey, this is what this guy's being hung for. This is him.
Right.
So, I mean, to start, you need to realize, I suppose, that there's a certain relativity to ethics in regards from the inside as to the outside. And basically what you want to do is you want to maintain the organic wholeness, the health of your tribe, of the inside.
Right.
And so I said that using versus was probably a bad word, because you're not necessarily in opposition to the entire world out there.
Right.
But you're going to interact with it in a way that your tribe benefits.
Right. I see why we get along so well, because that's pretty much my entire shtick right there in 5 minutes. Right?
Right?
So understanding the wall. Now the relationship. So one of the things that from a Christian perspective, and again, to the Christians out there, this isn't an attack on Christianity, but I think using that paradigm will allow to create the framework for the parallel that I'm trying to establish here. They look to the book. They look to the behaviors of Jesus. They look to, what they see as God-handed truth. And they design the morality of their lives based on that. We don't see that replicated in any parallel sense in heathen cultures. What do you get when it comes to the relationship with the gods where morality is concerned?
I don't think the gods impose morality or anything like that. I think it's less like these are God's commandments and more of a matter of you want to put yourself in line with God's will. And how do you know if somebody's in line with God's will? It's like Jacob Grimm said, that of the fortunate man, God sees him, and of the unfortunate man, God forgot him. So it's manifested in the quality of your life, whether you're in line with the will of God or not.
Right. And, it's always been.
It's about the extent of what the gods have to do with it.
Right, right. And, it's an interesting, distinction to make between the two philosophies, the two ways of life, the two religions, however you want to categorize it. But one of the things that always drew me to the heathen identity and culture was the prominence of this self-reliant drive to develop the individual, to stay connected to those, my phrase is inside the wall, and allow yourself to develop without the reliance upon other players, other factors, other agents, in your own individual pursuit of destiny. And, when I look at, just as a regular man pulling the camera back for a second, what is going to get on in life? What is going to get somebody through life? In my experience is always, any sort of adversity that I've come across, it was not traversed, it was not navigated or crushed until I realized that I was the one that was going to have to do that. And it was going to be in the form of action. And, my phrase, pressure to power, is really representative of the formula that took me from, not that I'm at the top of any fucking mountain now by any means, but I was certainly in a valley at the start of this whole fucking adventure, and,
Right.
a little bit about my history. I've spoken about it on podcasts a great deal. And the one thing, which is why it peeves me so much when I see this victim mindset, especially when it's sold, like candy to, ghetto, poor, stupid people. who just eat it up all too willingly. The only thing that I've ever seen get somebody out from, the valleys of existence has been an unrelenting, non-negotiable drive to climb. And nobody ever, did it for you. Nobody ever, told you just take it on the chin and everything will be okay in the long run. Like, nobody ever gets anywhere that way. The distinction that you just made of, the gods, forgetting the one and the one who didn't make anything of himself, as opposed to the one who did, that is the guide that we find in nature. That's the guide we find. The guide we find in anything that we know in terms of a process of success. It's either you do it or you don't do it, and there's no other players involved, right?
Exactly. One of the problems I think with laws and what have you is, law is a Germanic word. They refer to our ancestors as lawless or godless, or soulless, and so we coin these words.
Right.
What do you mean lawless? That's where you got the word from.
Right.
But law is what comes into play when thew breaks down, when the social behaviors break down. And one of the problems with law is the more you have to defer to it, the more thew breaks down. So
right.
law is actually like an ever ravenous wolf that would devour everything, and leave you entirely at its mercy if you let it to. Look at the world today, right?
Right. I just had a conversation the other day with a friend of mine, and we were talking about supplementing testosterone, right? So a little bit of a segue here. So while we're talking about it, I'm telling him, he's telling me some stuff that he's going through. And I said, listen, I have experience working with a lot of people who have gone and gotten testosterone replacement therapy, and it helped them get through this patch that, it's very much like what you're describing to me. And he said it's too expensive. And I recall saying to him, well, just don't go to a doctor then. Go. And he said, well, I don't want to be, I'm not a criminal. I think that was the phrase. I'm not a criminal. And then I looked at him and I said, what's wrong with being a criminal? And he's like, well, and he didn't really have an answer. And I don't think most people do, because they're not used to looking at laws. And I've said before, laws are the reflected morals of a people. But without that morality, these laws are just as disconnected as any tyrant's commands or demands. It's, we have to live these things organically, and we codify them to, I usually put it in terms of, regulating the deviants, regulating the people on the fringes, so that they fall in line with the majority, the collective understanding of what is right and wrong. But we don't get to decide whether we're good people or bad people by starting at the law. We start at what we know to be true. And I asked him, I said, I just said to take testosterone from a doctor, and you were okay with it. But then I said to get it from somebody else, now you think somehow you're a bad guy and moral? Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you ever crossed the street when it wasn't a green light? Like, we can get really nitty gritty with here with what's a fucking criminal, right? And so I think a lot of people have lost that connection to the function of it, to the function of why it is we do the things that we do under the guise of this is the right thing, or don't do that, that's the wrong thing. And too many people are deferring to the, from without, it's a phrase you used, understanding and sort of regulation of an artificial intent,
Right. I just had something that I was going to say. If I could just pull it out. I'm so used to watching you.
I fucking talk a lot. I know.
Interacting with you, I just kind of zone out.
You're like watching a podcast, and it's like talking to you. Exactly. It's like, what are you doing, Jamey?
Interacting with it.
Yeah, it's Go ahead.
You go ahead. Maybe it'll come back to me.
So I believe it will. So for me, it's always been the struggle of, in my life, as much of a journey as anybody else's. I go from the point, I had a very tumultuous childhood and adolescence. It certainly wasn't the roughest. by any means. But, I come from an environment and a family that has had drug issues and crime issues. And, I've had, family members overdose. I've had a family member die of AIDS. I never really had, and also coming from a mixed heritage, when I was with the white kids, I was the spick. When I was with the Hispanic kids, I was the white boy, and so I've always had to find my own way because there wasn't a group to guide me. So,
Right.
When I look at, and this is a weird parallel, but I'm going to say it because it came to my mind. But when I hear Jack Donovan talk about masculinity, well, he's a homo. And he's trying to figure out how to be a man because he's a fucking homo. And no homo is going to teach him how to be a man. Well, I would say in a similar way, I'm making that comparison. In a similar way, I have had to basically define what tribe is supposed to be, how I'm supposed to connect with people. And because it wasn't innate, I didn't find, or if it was just jaded and dismantled at a very early age. But by the time I got to my adolescence, violence was the answer to everything, because violence was the only thing that gave me control. It was the only thing that gave me status. When I see the young kids joining gangs, I get it. I don't approve of it, obviously, but I get it. I get when they don't have a mom and dad and they don't have any value, how this is the tribe. This is the longing that is satisfied in the most dysfunctional of ways, but it is satisfying nonetheless. And, so when it came to morality, I used to think morality was, listen, anybody fucks with you, you break them down until they stop fucking with you. And, if he can't protect it, he doesn't deserve it. And if you don't like somebody, you need to let them know. These are just laws that I started developing because I was in an aquarium, and trying to figure shit out, as I was going. It was like a weird, alternate universe Lord of the Flies, where I was stuck, in this just unled, unguided state, trying to find a way. And
one of the things growing up, more or less was in the same position as you. A lot of dysfunction in my family, so I didn't have great examples there. And then you're trying to fit in outside of your family, but you keep running into dysfunction there as well.
Right.
And so it's like you said, it's hard to find the path.
Right. Yeah, it took a lot for me. And I remember I think the real turning point for me was I was locked up. I was 16 years old. I was in Valhalla Penitentiary in New York, which I call my first trip to Valhalla, right? And I'm sitting there in my cell, and the way that it was designed was not like the bars that you see on movies and stuff. It was, the sliding metal door with the fiberglass window, and you are in an enclosed metal room where there's single rooms, so you're by yourself. And I was having a panic attack. I was having a claustrophobic panic attack. And hyperventilating, dizzy, freaking out, thought I was going to, it was as bad as a panic attack as you could think. And nobody was there to help me. Nobody was there. Nobody cared. Nobody gave a shit.
Right.
I think the prisoners, the inmates on the other side of the hall were, I think, making fun of me. And it was, if you've ever seen, Conan, when they throw him in the pit at first and the guy starts beating the shit out of him. And it's like you either fight back or you just release yourself to whatever the universe is going to do with you. And for me, I had to fight back. Like I told myself, I'm better than this. Fuck all these people here. I don't deserve to be here. I don't deserve to be this. I certainly deserve to be there. but I didn't deserve to stay there, right? And it was then, and I remember this was the summer between my junior and senior years in high school. And I went and I was given the opportunity to, when I was originally sent to prison, it was a 3-month sentence. And in New York, you have to serve 2/3 of your sentence. So it's the whole, getting off for good behavior thing. So at the 2-month mark, I would have gotten out a week before school started, and I would have been able to start fresh. Well, my first couple of days being there, I was offered a deal where I could take house arrest. I'd be home with the ankle, bracelet, and but I'd have to do the whole 3 months, which meant the first month of my senior year of high school, I would be on house arrest still. And I refused. I said, no, I'm going to fucking stay here. I'm going to deal with it, because luckily I'd already had that panic attack and I'd gotten over it. And I had already come to the conclusion that there's no way that I'm going to jeopardize and sabotage my last year in school. And sure as shit, I went honor roll, played sports, all city, football, and turned it around. And that began the process of going, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't be angry at everybody. Maybe cops aren't all bad guys. Maybe I could get more with sugar than I can with vinegar. Maybe, and I started this process that was one part having an open mind, and another part continuing to explore and seek out more information, knowing that at no point did I ever have all that was there, and it led me all the way to the point where, I don't know if, did you ever hear the story of the hammer and how I became heathen?
No, I haven't.
So when I was a teenager, everybody in my neighborhood had a weapon. Most people had guns, if not guns, knives. Well, I had a hammer. And the hammer I took from my father's workshop, and that's what I carried. And I carried it in inside my jacket, a case, and I'd be lying if I said nobody got hit with that hammer. And I don't know what brought me to a hammer, but I'm going to get it. Hold on one second.
Sure.
So a few years back, my parents are moving out of the Bronx. They sold their home and they were moving about an hour north out of the city. A countryside house, really nice house. And my younger brother happened to be in my parents' home that we grew up in most of our lives. And he said, hey, Justin, you remember that hammer? He calls me. You remember that hammer you used to carry? And I said, oh, yeah, I remember. He goes, yeah, I found it. I said, get out of here. He goes, yeah, I'm sending you a picture of it right now. And this was the hammer.
Nice.
So this is what I used to carry when I was a teenager, because it made sense to me. Because I didn't carry a knife. I didn't carry a gun. I had knives. I may have had a couple of guns. But this is what made sense. And this is what I enjoyed carrying. This is what I felt was a representation of me. I had a very personal attraction to this. So prior to my brother sending me this picture, I had forgotten about the hammer. But I had already started researching heathenism. I had already started reading the Poetic Edda. I had already started, connecting with content online about heathenism and Asatru. And this was just out of this shit seems to make sense. This stuff, it seemed these guys get it right. They understand the natural, connection to life and the rules that we should be following. And these gods, they stand for the right stuff. And they're not asking you to be weak. They're not asking you to go on your knees. They're not asking you to do all these different things. And then my brother, fast forward a year or two, sends me this picture. And it was like, all right, here I am. This is what it is. So it was a crazy time because prior to that, I was an anti-theist. I would be lying if I just said atheist. I was like the elite militant unit of the atheists. I was the guy that was like, oh, what God do you believe in? Yeah, you're a fucking idiot. Like that's how conversation started with me. And I had to basically fucking eat it, and just be true to myself and be honest and be moral, I would say, ironically, and not do the thing that felt better, and not please the people that were disconnected, but actually live a life that was true and natural and organic. And that's what led me, to heathenism,
Right.
So your process, you said you started early on. How did that happen? Like, how does that come about?
I don't even like talking about it because people, they read too much into the story, but I
just told a story about having a panic attack in jail. Like, you're good.
I was really sick for about 3 months back around the beginning of grade 7. So around when I was 12 years old, and had a lot of time on my hands and was doing a lot of thinking because none of these doctors could figure out what was wrong with me. So I'm like, am I going to die? I didn't know. Really sick. But yeah, I had a lot of time on my hands. My mom brought me home some comics to read. One of them was a Thor comic, and I got to thinking, well, this guy's pretty cool, but is he really a god? So I broke out the dictionary, and I remembered some conversations I had back in grade 6 with my friend who was he was an immigrant from Berlin. And I remember him talking about Donner and Wotan, and then I looked in the dictionary, and sure enough, okay, these are legitimate gods. So I'm like, well, I'm going to start trying to pray to these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I guess you could say the rest is history.
Right. And that was at 12.
12, 13 years old. Yeah, around there.
So explain to me then, because it's sort of like this paradoxical aspect of who I am, in that I'm really good at dealing with people, but I abhor dealing with people. Right? So it's like I'm like the 8-foot black guy that hates basketball. It's like it's one of these things where I have all of these innate abilities, I would say, right? And I'm sounding pretty fucking arrogant, but I mean this like I know I have the gift of gab. I understand people. I'm very akin, and I've been very good at recognizing patterns and the dynamics between people. But in this day and age, there are so many weak fucking people that it's hard to connect. And I think I've been very fortunate in that I have the Martial Arts Academy, because this is my social filter. It's like, if you make it through, I'm like the boss at the top of the fucking building, like, you make it through all the floors, then you get to hang out with me. And, and it's really just, I don't want to become desensitized to the aquarium. I don't want to see somebody do something that is despicable and not say something, because it's going to be socially unacceptable. And I want to be the guy to make the situation awkward when somebody does something where he should be socially checked. And I cannot get broken down, which is why I stay behind the walls of my school, because I will get desensitized because I see it all the time. Now, my point for this whole fucking tangent, if you follow my podcast, you know about my tangents, Jamey. My point of it all is, one of the hardest things that I've found since since becoming a heathen and pursuing this identity, is connecting with other, not only like-minded men and women, but strong-minded men and women. What has been your experience where that's concerned?
Yeah, about trying to connect with other heathens?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Like, I live on the West Coast.
Of Canada.
Of Canada to boot, right? So it's been tough. Like, to be honest, I've met Christians that I like far better than a lot of the heathens that I've met, just because they're more Anglo-Nordic in their sentiments and their values and what have you. So, yeah, no, I find it really difficult to connect with people who just want to make shit up.
Right.
Which is what a lot of them are, and nobody seems to want to put effort into anything. They just want to sit around a campfire and drink beer out of a horn, and like that's good enough for Odin.
Right, right. And and I guess, I mean, to be fair, Christians will have those people too, and any fucking category of identity will have that swath of quality in its members. But for me, one of the things that I found most challenging is because I'm like the tribe guy, right? I'm the guy that I study tribe. Like, why? Because my tribe has been fucked up since the time I was a kid, and I had to figure it out. I married my wife. I knew her for a month. We're married 15 years next month. We have 4 beautiful children. She and I still get along. We were married a month when we got married. I had formulas from the time I was a kid developing to the time, to this day. And when I share these formulas with people, like I tell people, I used to have the thing on raising children and homeschooling. Like, you have to homeschool your kids. And I would, but for so much of my adult life, I didn't have kids, right? So people ask me, when did you decide to homeschool? And I said, I told my mother, this is true, during my high school graduation, I looked at my mother, and my father was working, I think. Only my mother was there. And I said, I'm never going to put my children through this, right? I was like, washed my fucking hands of that whole experience. I said, I'm never going to do it. Because they don't treat you, they don't train you to connect with the people that matter, to connect with the laws that matter, with the universal laws. They don't make moral people. They beat down the individual. They teach you how to stand in line. They teach you how to be a good cog in a machine. So as I've developed these formulas, and then I discover heathenism, and I look at a people who knew nothing if not function, I was so eager to go and connect with all of these people. And who do I find? I find the Black Viking. I find the obese fucking wizard heathen. I have my fucking 1,000-year-old outfit on with my horn that has like Mountain Dew in it, or fucking something like who the fuck are these people? And it's like, even like the heathens, the majority of heathens, and dare I say majority of heathens that I've run into in life since identifying as such, like, they're people that in the time of the heathen people, during those times, these people would have been fucking killed. It's like it's like a time machine, and all the wrong people got in. It's like all the valuable people were busy doing shit, and all the losers got in a fucking time machine. So
exactly.
So it's very difficult, which is why I don't take finding people like you, people like Chris Jacchio, and I could go down the list of people, Henrik and Lana from Red Ice. Like, these are all people who are either Asatruers or heathens, even Augustus, Invictus, his crazy ass, just solid people. And when I find them, I have to stay connected, because fuck, man, like, there's not a lot of them around there, So what do you see as being an approach? Because I know, how long have you been married now?
Oh man, not long. Just not even a year yet.
Not
a year
even
this June. Yeah, a year this June. We've been together for 5 years. But
and I told you, you and your wife were friends in my head for a long time because of just how much, how frequently we interact online. And you guys seem like such solid people. But what do you see as a way to deal with this for the modern heathen who, and now, of course, obviously everybody listening to this interview, and if you're a heathen, of course, you're not one of those guys. You're clearly one of the strong ones, right, Mr. Listener? I mean, you got all your shit squared away, of course. But to those other people, like, what advice would you give them? Because you've managed to stay true to this, it seems, despite being isolated.
Oh yeah, well, that's a no-brainer. I mean, this is my heritage, right?
Right.
I'm not getting it from a group. I'm not getting it from a book. I'm not even getting it from whatever went on back when I was 12 years old. I mean, it's my blood heritage. So I connect to it on a very personal level. Um, I'm just looking to take up my heritage and put my heritage into practice, and really don't care about anybody's approval or disapproval.
Right.
It's mine. And I
Right.
think maybe a lot of people would do better if they saw it that way,
Right.
rather than, oh, go join the Viking group and be a Viking.
Right.
It's like, you are what you are.
Right.
Whether or not they accept you is beside the point.
Right. You know, and it's interesting because, and maybe you can give me some feedback on this too. I've always been hesitant. Like I notoriously do not play well with others. I just never have. I get very claustrophobic very easily. As soon as I see people either sabotaging or misrepresenting their mission, or just, you know, being weak to the point where it's like, all right, I can't be around this person. I have one of my programs, it's called the Alliance Codes. And there's a component of it, which is build the bridge. And it's, you know, the two rules for Alliance, as I put them, are honor the mission and respect the expiration date. So for me, respecting the expiration date means that I could preemptively now identify that this shit ain't working out, and I could start downgrading the Alliance to where I never break the mission, but we modify it in a downgraded way so that we could functionally move apart, right? So as I tend to do that with so many people, the thought of joining a group is somewhat, I don't know if daunting is the word, but unappealing, I think is probably more accurate. But
Right.
now I go ahead.
Oh, I'm just agreeing with you. Sometimes it just looks like more work.
Right.
If I go into this group, you know, it's going to look like more work to you, and you're going to look like a troublemaker to them. So, I mean, you do your thing, and I'll go do my thing.
Right. And, you know, and now here's the thing. That's all well and good so long as my thing allows me to be functional, right? So, but we do have, you know, tribal, you know, journeys that we need to take because they're a component of our lives. Part of the purpose, the essence of what it is that we're supposed to be doing is becoming stronger. And, you know, my two goals in life, you know, strong legacy and a good death. Well, the legacy component is significant, and it's either in my deeds, my children, my, you know, my reputation, my, you know, whatever defines it. It's significant to me. But what is your take on? Because, and here's where I'm somewhat ambiguous in my positioning, and maybe this is somewhat of a cop-out, but I honestly have not done a lot of deep thinking about this specific thing. But to bring it up in context now, because it's relevant, I look at groups like the Asatru Folk Assembly and different groups. The AFA, I think, was founded by Steve McNallen, who I've had on the podcast before. And now it's headed by, you know, a bunch of solid people, people that I interact with on social media, and, you know, they're solid people, but still the idea of a group is somewhat, you know, it makes me uneasy because is this what it's supposed to be about? And balancing that with, well, how is this ever going to propagate itself? How is it ever going to, you know, permeate through society to the people, you know, who should be connected to this without some type of organization, right? So, you know, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question, MC. I just kind of have settled into my own family. Like, I got my mom, I got my kid, I got my wife. We plan on having at least one other kid. You know, we got our friends and our coworkers and things like that. You know, that's kind of like leaves on the wind there, except for the friends part.
Right, right.
But yeah, as far as the legacy goes, like, yeah, it's like you're not going to get your name in a history book or anything, and I don't even know why a person would want to, but how long are you going to be remembered unless you can establish your community and have it exist intergenerationally, because that is the carrier of your legacy. It bestows your glory and it carries it forward into the future.
Right.
So that's a good question.
Yeah, because that's maybe I should, maybe I should invite, Matt Flavel. I don't know if it's Flavel or Flavel. He is the head of the AFA now. Maybe I'll ask him to come on and we'll discuss it, because, that's my thing. My brother, my younger brother, he's going to hate that I'm bringing this up, but a few years back, he started a motorcycle club. He and a buddy of his, and a bunch of guys were in the motorcycle club. And they were like, like the Little Rascals fucking motorcycle club. I used to call them the Sons of Mediocrity, right? And, when you look at, and my brother's he's my brother, like solid. He can fight his ass off. His word is written in fucking blood on stone. Like, he is a man's man. Great friend. But again, he had this intention, but when put in practice, it was like it's like the clown show. It's, half the guys were solid, squared away guys. The other half, had really nice motorcycles and really like wearing leather jackets,
Right.
But they, half of them never been in a fight in their fucking life. None of them like had a functional relationship. And as expected, it fell apart. So I look at the intent of some of these organizations and understand that, it's like, yeah, what you're saying you're trying to accomplish, if accomplished, would be a good thing. It'd be a good thing for good people. But when I look at that whole pursuit played out in real time, in my experiences with it, my observations of it, it is very hard to generate the leverage to change people's nature, to become that of a more functional way. And most people, instead of looking to change who they are, or change the application of their nature to that of a more functional one, most people will rationalize and settle and basically do what's going to make them comfortable, and when I look at these associations,
they put a lot of work into that too.
Yep.
I mean, some of these heathens are, in British Columbia here that I've dealt with over the years, the amount of energy and the amount of time they'll put into arguing against heathenry.
Right.
Like, if they devoted that same amount of time to doing like what I suggested they do, like study more, research, like the Poetry Guild at the BC Freehold, they don't want to study poetry. They just want to write whatever they're familiar with. And, that's fine. That's good. I don't want to put that down. But you're part of a Germanic heathen group. And this is a poetry guild devoted to Germanic, indigenous Germanic poetry.
Right.
But they can't be bothered to study any of that, but they'll put all kinds of time into arguing against why they shouldn't.
Right.
It's like, whatever, you guys.
Yeah, and to me, there's it's just, referencing back what we were discussing earlier, like at some point you have to realize that everything is bigger than you. And the more powerful position is finding the current of the river and learning how to leverage it for your betterment, not denying its existence, somehow thinking that you could will yourself to negating that current. And in our history, people did not have the surplus of goods, of resources, to the point where they could actually start condemning the natural order of what has led us to today. So when I talk about, especially with my coaching students, one of the things that I tend to deal with often is stress responses and, anxiety and depression and, the things that a lot of modern men find themselves grappling with more and more. And one of the when I start creating the illustration of of what I'm eventually going to use to get them through whatever they're getting through, I start off by saying, one of the paradoxes of being so smart is that humans are the only ones that could imagine and feel and physically respond to a threat that doesn't exist, and when you start getting into stress responses, like, that's what it is. It's like, we think the lion's about to eat us. There is no fucking lion, but our body doesn't realize that, and it is reacting like there is, over and over again.
That you bring that up because, as you know, this is the first time I've done this online thing, especially with an audience that's going to be out there.
Right.
And I'm thinking of a time to plan this out for. It's kind of like, well, okay, kind of don't want to do it immediately. But okay, well, next Tuesday I got some time. My son won't be home. My wife will be out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a week from now will be a good time. Right. But then I'm like, well, that gives me a week to sit around thinking about it and building it up in my head and starting. Let's just do it tomorrow.
Yeah, for the record, I contacted you yesterday, and if you notice, and I have some experience with this now because you'll be able to refer back to this. I put I'm ready as early as tomorrow, right, and I'm like so. In case you're wondering when's appropriate, like, let's get it done, I had one guy recently, this fucking guy, he had his handler contact me and say he wanted to do an interview. He's actually Canadian too. He's some business guy who's looking to get on more podcasts, and he seemed to have some content that was half worth of shit. So I was like, all right, I'll have him on. And we scheduled it for like a month in advance. So I'm like, all right, this guy's got his shit together, fucking month in advance, whatever. So we make all the arrangements, and I'm waiting fucking the interview time, and the fucking guy is nowhere to be found. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? So fuck that. Get that shit done. My first reaction was the right one, right? So what was I talking about before? I got thrown off. I don't fucking know. I was just talking about something. This is the way it works, right? So
building up things in your mind is...
I got it. Yes, the stress, right? So just like we're too smart that we actually will create stresses that don't exist, well, we actually also, in a similar way, have such a surplus of resources that we no longer understand that we ultimately need to survive. So you have these people who their philosophies, their very identities are starting to reflect this notion that violence will eventually be past violence, will eventually be past poverty, will eventually be past suffering, as if all of these things aren't necessary for life itself. And to even ponder the way to eliminate suffering in the world, to me, and sometimes people just have reactions and they're like night and day, and I guess who I am just so subconsciously react. Whenever I hear that, I'm like, you arrogant motherfucker. Like, do you consider yourself to be a fucking god? Because if you're talking about eliminating suffering, that's fucking God talk. Like, suffering is necessary. It reminds us. How do you know what fucking cold is if you don't feel heat? And heat cold.
You're not crying when you pop out of the womb there for no reason at all, right?
Yeah, I mean it's and the thing is, and I know this is one of my big criticisms of Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson, smart guy, very smart guy. I'm even willing to say well-intentioned, but a weak man. And you could tell he's a weak man because every once in a while he drops these Easter eggs. That's a pun on Christianity. That also from, our fucking holiday. Anyway, but you hear him drop these hints that he doesn't want people to suffer. He doesn't want pain to be around. He wants to heal everybody. And this is how the utopian fucking communist fucking, momentum starts to build with a bunch of people who have figured it out. I know better than nature. Nature wants people to suffer. Well, I have a better plan. And it's like, come on.
Remove the resistance.
Yeah, it's like,
resistance. I'll take care of you. You won't suffer. But you go to a zero gravity environment. What happens to an astronaut up in outer space? And you degenerate. You become weak.
Right. Absolutely. And it's just, it's frustrating because it shouldn't be frustrating, but it is. I acknowledge it because I constantly try to combat these things. I'm constantly, interacting with people, sharpening my own sword through these conversations, establishing and every once in a while changing, admittedly, my positions on certain things. But, at the heart of it, and it's what, again, I feel has connected me so effectively and efficiently to the heathen identity is that it's natural. When people ask me to explain, what I think heathenism is, to me, it's the product of a people navigating a land through time and building a consciousness that became strong enough to allow gods to populate it. And it's something that is very real, but more than anything, it's very organic. It is very natural, that the gods are not, immortal, and that they have, certain guides and leads and rules that even they need to follow in order to get along with other gods. And, there needs to be sacrifice in order to get certain things. And like, these are things that are very much components and representative of the things that we should all be looking to adhere to become more functional in life,
Right. Yeah, I'm not so sure about the gods dying myself, but they're definitely there. It's all a reflection of the elder communities and their interactions with each other within the community and their reactions with everything outside of the community.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It's so as I see it. So, and give me your take, because I want you to educate not only me but the listeners on some of the lore itself, and where do you see morality shown? Where do you see the value of having the gods connect with us in the sort of mission, the plight to become better people? Where do you see that reflected?
The divine influence?
Yes.
I'd say at our roots. To teach us that that our identities are sacred, and as a result, they must remain whole or holy. Our language is sacred. It was a gift from Woden. Various fighting techniques from Woden, plowing and farming techniques from gods such as that. I don't see them sitting up there judging us. They're very much they hallow our cultural identities,
right,
and teach us to value those things.
Right. Where do you see the heathen tradition contradict or conflict with modern society?
Theirs was very organic, very experientially based, and ours is just an outside force trying to impose things on us. You can even look at their elder cons of how they dealt out justice. You're talking earlier about the guy who didn't want to be a criminal, right? Well, there are all kinds of offenses up to and including man killing in elder Germanic society. You'd pay the fine, the weregild, and then you carry on your way. You don't carry the mark of Cain of being a criminal on you. The number of crimes where the state would actually intervene, the equivalent of the state would intervene and throw you in a prison or beat you or hang you, they were very few and far between.
Right.
And even Tacitus noted in Germania, none of these punishments could be carried out except on the order of the priest, and the priest needed to consult their god.
Right.
Primarily God of war, but he had to consult the god, so it wasn't even his opinion, right?
Right. So,
Whereas,
go ahead.
Yeah, what we have today, you can see why he thought, well, I don't want to be a criminal because I don't know, man. It's kind of like you're standing and God's watching every movement that you're making, and he gave you that criteria, and if you don't live up to it,
Right.
you know, then you're
Right.
screwed. You're a bad
Right.
person.
Right. And that's, what you see. And, I've been somebody that I think it's probably my personality. I have 3 sons, same parents, same house, very similar, if not identical, upbringings and circumstances, completely different fucking people, completely different people, so when I look at my tendencies, via my personality and just who I am, like, I understand it might just be me, but for me, it's like I never gave a fuck what, like, the government said, or like when somebody would call me a criminal, because technically I was, but it was never like any, shameful, oh man, I'm marked with this status of, of sorrow and shame. And like, it was never that. It's like, I always saw it as like, I don't have to please these fucking people. Like, these people don't mean anything to me. If my father told me he was disappointed in me, that would be the fucking, 1,000-pound bag of bricks on my fucking shoulders, but like the judge, the cop, like, I don't fucking care. I just don't want to get locked up again, So for me, it was very organic, very functional, but also I understood what the wall was,
Right. Yeah. Once again, I just had something I was going to say to that. Kind of slipped out of my head. I don't know. Carry on. Another 15 minutes.
Listen, you have to practice having a conversation with me because I am fucking tangent man. So talking about, the differences between what was functional and functionally developed there, like, you'll see modern people, like, they'll look at these, reactions and these consequences, and they'll say, well, these things are archaic, they're savage, they're uncivilized, and but then these are the same people who populate a society that has 5-year-old boys on hormones, pornography that is growing exponentially, to the point where, and I just had this big, rant on porn the other day, but this is like what is that? Like, I don't understand what it is that they're trying to avoid, that they're so easily motivated to start throwing around terms like savage and uncivilized. But it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? By the way, I'm married with 4 kids. Like, I love my wife. I hug my children. Like, who the fuck is a savage here?
Exactly. You got to do what you got to do. In situations that you've been. As far as taking morality from on high, it's like, okay, thou shalt not lie. So if some kidnappers kick down your door and bust into your house and they're like, where's the children? Well, you can't lie. You can tell them. Does that make you a moral person?
Right.
You're gonna, thou shalt not kill. Well, you're going to kill them too if they're after your kids.
Right.
What kind of human being would you be if you just, they're hiding in the bedroom closet. Feel free to help yourself. We didn't want them anymore anyway. Like,
you see, but this is what happens when you have a code or a collection of codes that are artificial, that are engineered.
Right.
You're constantly going back to unless, it's like when everybody thinks we're one law away from freedom. It's like, if we just had that one more law, then everybody would be free. It's like, no, it's the opposite, right? We need to be able to, I don't know, what was the example you used, where, if you broke down, the more you had to apply the laws of the land. And you see it with how we are dealing with each other nowadays. when two neighbors have a problem, they call a representative, a violence representative from the state, to come in and intercede in the interaction between the two neighbors. Well, there was a time where, like where I live right now in Pennsylvania, we don't have a police force in the town that I live. There was like a regional police force. Like I've lived there, I think 3 years, a little over 3 years now. I've seen a police car drive past my road maybe 4 times, in 3 years. But the thing is, when you have the absence of that authority, AKA a natural environment, you have to learn how to deal with people. You get reps of building the type of societies that everybody that proclaims they want to have, but they don't understand. The more artificial intent or the artificial installations and investments you make into an environment, the less functional it's going to be, because you are not as smart as the universe,
Right. Yeah, definitely. That's the contrast between law and thew once again.
Right.
Like you're there, you're stuck interacting with these people. There's nobody's going to step in and do the job for you. You got to figure it out. And over the generations, you figure it out and you come up with the tribe's thew.
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, you don't got to go to court or mediation or whatever the case may be, because you're just going to sort your stuff out between each other.
That's right. That's right. And all right, let's segue to this final thing I wanted to talk about. Being a practicing heathen, what does that mean to you? Does that include ritual with your wife, with your son? I'm assuming your son is not from your wife; it's from a previous relationship.
Yeah, previous arrangement.
How old is your son?
He just turned 18.
He turned 18. Oh, older dude. Is he a heathen?
I don't know if he would. Kind of, sort of. Like he'll participate in our rituals with us and what have you, but he's not at my books or at me for information. I think if he talks about religion with his friends and what have you, he'll say, "Yeah, we believe in our ancestors." What's the matter with that?
Right, right. And how do you participate in your home? Like, what is actively being a heathen to you?
Well, just beyond our conduct and how we interact with each other and other people, we have our 4 major blessings a year at Yuletide and at Easter, Midsummer, or Harvest.
Right.
And just stay, during the harvest tide, we'll go out to the farmer's market to get some food, to have our religious feast and what have you.
Right, right. Very good. Very good. All right. Well, I got to tell you, Jamey, I enjoyed this conversation. And I will have you on again if you are not too traumatized by my tangent every other minute of the conversation. I'm going to have to send you like a pressure project notepad so you don't lose your train of thought. You can write things down.
That'll help.
Because I am
starstruck as well.
I appreciate that, but I am notorious for fucking people's trains of thoughts up. Right? So, not only do I talk a lot, but I'm very animated, and we're a video, so I get it. But I appreciate it. Much gratitude to you for taking the time out and sharing some power with us. Thank you very much for doing that.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and you holy shit, you're just a cool guy on the internet. You don't have a website, and you don't have. Is there anything you want to promote? Anything you want to?
I got a blog.
All right.
Twisco, TIWISKO. I don't know. WordPress. There we go. WordPress. It's on WordPress.
I'll tell you what. I will do the homework and make sure that I find out what it is, and it will be on the description of the video and on the note page on the site. All right. But
awesome.
Thank you, Jamey. Stand by. I want to talk to you right after this, but thanks again.
Great. Thank you.